In the 80s, an up-and-coming band was looking to create the best album of their time. They finished half the album, and they took a big break to gain some perspective on what they'd just written. From that break came a massive hit that started as a fast song, but when it was slowed down and played on a piano instead of a guitar, it became one of the most heart-wrenching rock ballads of the late 80s. The iconic singer took the vocal from 0 to 10 in seconds and made it legendary. Up next, the co-writer of this hit and founding member of one of the biggest bands ever tells us how they wrote it. He also shares an amazing moment when a stadium full of 80,000 fans singing it in unison gave him a new perspective on the song. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. Make sure that you join our music community below by subscribing for our daily content. Stories of your favorite songs straight from the legends who made them or sang them or recorded them. All right, I'm excited to bring you another episode from our series Revelations. This is where featured artists reveal rare stories about their biggest songs, their biggest albums, their greatest albums, along with fascinating insight about their careers that you won't find anywhere else. I was fortunate to have a couple of great Zoom sessions with INXS co-founder and co-writer Andrew Ferriss. Andrew, of course, amazingly talented, a multi-instrumentalist. Along with Michael Hutchence, Andrew co-wrote most of INXS's biggest hits, including Need You Tonight, I Need You Tonight, New Sensation, What You Need, Suicide Blonde, and today's feature, Neve Tear Us Apart. Andrew and Michael Hutchence had a unique chemistry, and the 80s wouldn't have been the same without their indelible music. The music of INXS, incredible. Early on, even before they had a hit, Ray Manzarek of The Doors heard INXS play, and he told Andrew Ferriss Michael Hutchence reminded him exactly of Jim Morrison. Man, it's so true. Michael Hutchence was undoubtedly Morrison-esque. One of the greatest frontmen of the 80s. Coming up next, Andrew tells us the story of that chemistry and how INXS created Kick, the 1987 blockbuster, including the fierce and heart-wrenching 1988 rock ballad Neve Tear Us Apart. As we go into this interview, I do want to thank our amazing sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. When you go to Zenni.com, not only do you have the ability to create and customize your own pair of glasses, you can also have blue blocks to protect your eyes from digital blue light that we run into every day with our gadgets. Make sure to go to Zenni.com to create your custom frames. Here is Andrew Ferriss of INXS. 1987, I mean, what could ever prepare you for Kick? The album sold 7 million copies just in America. It sold over 20 million worldwide. Number 1 in Canada, number 3 here, number 9 in the UK, number 1 in Australia. Pretty much top 5 everywhere. Chris Thomas again. And David Nicholas was an important part of that as well as an engineer. When I got this album and I listened to it, and I mean, I listened to every track, and it was one of the first albums I bought with my own money. And when you got an album, you listened to that album over and over and you'd hear every song. But I wanted to get every detail about this album as a kid. And I remember reading that you wanted it to sound like the future.
Yeah, I guess that sounds, well, it sounds like a strange thing to say, but we did. You know, we talked a bit about where we thought the stylization of everything was heading, you know, and technology, and we were right, was a serious driver, you know. It because not too long after we recorded Kick, it went smack bang into DJ culture and remixes and, you know, the dance movement. You know, which is still going, raves and all the rest of it, you know, and the massive explosion, which is fantastic, of rap music and all that came along with it. That's right, on time is tricky. It's tricky. Michael and I talked about it. I said, we think that's going to be the future. This is what's going to happen. And so we tried to think about with Kick is how can we make it so some of these songs are still going to be relevant down the track, you know? And we did. We worked on that a bit together. The irony of it was Neve Tear Us Apart. Which has to be the most covered song I know of ours. And so many people have done it. I don't even know anymore how many people have done it. But probably my favorite cover of Neve Tear Us Apart is actually Joe Cocker's that he did. I always loved that. That was pretty cool. But I was going to say, I think Neve Tear Us Apart was the one song I remember saying to Chris Thomas, are we going to put that song on Kick? He's like, yeah, it's going to go on the album. You know, I really want it. And we're like, I remember thinking, why would you put Neve Tear Us Apart on Kick? It doesn't suit the rest of the record. And actually, it kind of, now it seems to make sense, right? But back then, it didn't sound like the rest of Kick. It was like an old, you know, even Chris Thomas said when he first heard the song, he wasn't sure about it either, because I originally wrote that dun 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 thing on the piano. You were there. And he said it sounds like an old 1950s or Stonesy blues thing. And I said, yeah, kind of is like that, you know. Earth angel, Earth angel. Wow. And then Chris suggested me to play the string samples on it instead, which is what I did. You know, I played it as a string orchestral part on the keyboard. And that was a very clever idea of Chris to do that. And then he fell in love with it. We all did. Well, that's it.
The label, a lot of people don't know this. They fought you on this. Tell me the story about that, because they offered $1 million. If this is true, I've read different accounts, but straight from the source. Tell me about that.
First of all, back in 1987, well, $5 is a lot of money if you don't have it. But $1 million back then was a lot of money, you know. Yeah. And, you know, and what it was the label was really nervous because we've talked a bit about during this interview, you know, how, you know, radio's become like a loaf of bread. It's all sliced up and everything's divided into country or rock or adult contemporary or rap, whatever it is, you know, classical, and everything's separated, you know. I think the record label was very nervous about us because we wouldn't behave ourselves and be, you know, good little boys. And fit into this genre and that genre of music, you know, that we kept jumping camps and, yeah, we've done that, let's try this. You know, we're always trying different things, you know. And we made them nervous. I think that's what it was all about. I think they were trying to help us. I look at it two ways. You could either say they were trying to control us, sure, yes. But were they also trying to help us? I think in a weird way they were. I think they were trying to help us to get on radio more and more by saying, look, don't play that kind of music on your album. Play this kind, and we can stick it on the radio for you, you know. I think that's part of the thinking was that as well. But it's just not what we wanted to do. It was an art for art's sake thing. We went, no, we don't want to do that. We want to stick to what we believe in, you know, and we want to go down this road. I think Chris Murphy, the band's manager, had done a very smart thing, and I think he'd been told not to take certain things to radio, but he did. So slide away and give me a moment. He did anyway. He took it to radio. You know, he just went, no, I'm going to take this. And he was right. You know, like it exploded, that album, because I don't think it was like anybody else's record that I've ever known about. It wasn't like anybody's record.
That's what blew me away, is that I remember as a kid, and it wasn't just me, it was in my family. My older sister loved it. I loved it. My younger brother loved it. It was cross-generational. No matter what age you were, he had this plan. That's what was great about it. You said Chris Murphy, and you guys started playing different places.
We realized, pretty early in on the piece that it was the international part of our career was one of our greatest strengths. Because when one market dumped you or decided you weren't fashionable, they didn't like you anymore, we went, okay, we'll go to France, we'll go to London, we'll go to, back to Australia, we'll go to New Zealand, we'll go to Asia, we'll go whatever, and that, or US, we'll go, Canada or whatever, South America. We were one of the first acts to ever break open the borders again for the music industry down to South America. A lot of people don't know that. It was really INXS and Sting, and we were one of the early pioneers in the early 80s of going down to South America. We were the first band to play the Armadillo Stadium in Mexico City since The Doors. In 1970, we were the first band, INXS. And when we spoke to the president's son, who came along that night, and they all went apeshit because we wore sombreros on stage. But anyway, back to Kick, and that's another thing I'm thankful for. We were talking about the success of the album. It blew us away. I got to tell you, it was just, I can't believe this is happening. It kept, we had consecutive, 4 or 5 top 5 hits off that record. It was nuts.
Well, something I've always wondered about is Devil Inside. Something that people don't know is that song did not test well when it was just the chorus, Devil Inside, Devil Inside. But when they tested it with your guitar line, the dan, 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 it tested off the charts. So I wanted to ask you about that, how you came up with that and about that story, because I think that that's so important with the song that I really feel like that's INXS. Michael Hutchence, of course, everybody talks about the charismatic, the wonderful, amazing frontman, but those guitar lines, those profound guitar lines with his voice. And I think that a key to INXS, at least in my opinion, is those profound guitar lines that go with those great vocals.
Well, right. With Devil Inside, I think I remember working on the music to that in London. I remember also that, later on in my life, during my career with INXS too, I lived in England for almost 5 years. And I used to go to Wembley Stadium where we'd played, and Wembley Arena. And I used to watch the biggest acts in the world come along, the biggest artists. And the main reason I went along was, I might be a fan of the artist, whoever it was. We had Tina Turner, Michael Jackson, the Rolling Stones, whoever it was. I'd go along and I'd watch them. And because I'm in the same industry as them, I'd try to work out what it is that the audience could get excited about with their show in tempos and grooves and whatever. With that particular song, with Devil Inside, it's almost a little bit Rolling Stonesy, where, when I remember some of the way that excitement when you'd have Jagger running across the stage, but the music's like pumping and just full on and sexy and cool, Some of that stuff, I'll take some of that attitude that they have and I'll stick it into the music, that we're making, so that when we walk on stage later on, it's exactly what you said, it just all comes alive. That was actually written with that purpose in mind.
Michael Hutchence also was talking about how he's kind of in a God and devil phase at that moment when he wrote the lyrics.
Yeah.
Good versus evil, all that kind of thing.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because, I have my own belief system. My dad used to say for many years, everyone has the inalienable right to go to hell in any way they choose. Your choice, but I take the philosophical view that, I think Michael was struggling with some stuff later in his life and trying to find a place for himself of calm within himself, Yeah. But, I know I used to listen to some of the lyrics that he was doing, or I'd read them, And I would say to him, and it wasn't because, and I would phrase it like this. I wouldn't say, I don't understand the lyric, I don't agree with it. The way I often would say to him is that what you really want to say? You know? And he knew what I meant. It's like, you put that out there, you're going to live with it, you know?
It's true.
That's interesting. I'll just say from a selfish point of view, as a co-songwriter, you know, I would not necessarily, that's not a lyric, Devil Inside, that I would write. Because I don't know about that, right? I don't know that everyone has the devil inside. Maybe some do, maybe some don't. But I respect the fact that that was Michael's take on that. And as a writer, I respect that. But I'll also say that, yeah, you know, as my kids were growing up, I thought about it a lot. And that song, for example, is that what I really believe in? I don't know about that. And then now my kids are adults, they understand, especially since some of them write the music themselves or lyrics or whatever, they get it now that they're older. You have to make a personal choice with that stuff, you know?
Well, and the music video, too, is a little sinister there.
Yeah, well, that's true, too, you know? But I think that's where, I think a lot of the time Michael would listen to my music beds and ideas, and he would deliberately choose his own lyric idea that he had, or he'd write it, because the mood of the music he would go, wham, now I know what that lyric's got to be, because I'd given him that momentum.
You had to know some of these songs were definitely hits, like Need You Tonight. I need you tonight. That had to be a no-brainer for you. You had to know that was a hit. In the U.S., it hit #1. It was #2 in Canada, Ireland, the UK, #3 in Australia, New Zealand.
For such a massive hit, I hate to tell you this, it was so easy to write. There was no, you know, sweating and that we'd done on previous writes, and afterwards we sweated a lot too. But that song was ridiculous. I was going to write with Michael, who was living in Hong Kong at that point. I was living in Sydney, and I had a little 8-track back then, analog tape recorder, and I had a drum machine. I was working on the riffs and stuff. And then I looked at my watch and realized that I was running out of time. I had to go to get a cab. Well, the cab turns up, and I'm panicking, realizing I'm in the middle of something I think is very important. And I'm tracking this thing like I'm like a mother. I'm going ding ding ding, and I'm programming stuff and playing or whatever. Cab driver I keep running out, going, just wait a minute. And he almost drove off. And then I just grabbed, I think, a cassette of it in the end. I just did a real quick, really rough mix of what I had. Turned up with it in Hong Kong, and I get there, and Mike was sitting there, and there's a very talented engineer in there as well. And he had a Fairlight keyboard, which is a very cool keyboard. And I was like, wow, because I'd never even used one before. And I played the demo I had of Need You Tonight, which is basically what the recording is kind of like. Then Michael goes, that's great. And he grabs it and he goes, give me 5 minutes. And he wrote lyrics straight out. Like, I saw him write it out, right? I'm like, wow, you know. And then he walks in the vocal booth and just sings it, just like that. That's the first vocal that he did, is what you're hearing. And then we added the keyboard parts, myself and the engineer, you know, helped me with like the sounds of that. And I love the keys on that, you know, the sound that the guy helped me get. It was fantastic. And then that's virtually what went on the record, was that recording that we did. Yeah, Chris heard it, Chris Thomas, and went, what's that? And we said, oh, that's what we've been tracking in Hong Kong. He goes, I want the tape. So we got the 2-inch tape, and we added that to Kick. It's part of the recording of it, was what we did in Hong Kong, Michael and I. And yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. You know, it was sort of just, I couldn't make up a stranger story, I don't think. It was how that came together. It was bizarre.
You want to my kind.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Andrew Ferriss, INXS, and Michael Hutchence, and of course, Neve Tear Us Apart. Do you remember the first time you heard Kick? First time you heard the great singles like New Sensation, I Need You Tonight, and of course, Neve Tear Us Apart. You can also celebrate Kick by getting the 30th anniversary edition of the album. I picked this up myself. It's amazing. Features the remastered original album, B-sides, rare mixes, and more across 3 CDs, LPs. You can get that. We'll link to it below. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe and also support us on Patreon to help us keep curating this history and these interviews. Help us keep the music alive. That's the idea. Until next time, 3 chords.